We just heard it all. We heard that it all comes down to just two commandments. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, with all your mind and all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. It's that simple. But it's also very, very profound. You heard that Gary read the first commandment, that simple prayer that the prophets and Israelites found in Deuteronomy. It is so important that they must start their day and end their day. It's such a motivator that when you enter and leave your home, you touch that mezuzah he mentioned, the little box by the door. Inside of that, rolled up, that pledge is written. Love and trust God. And then there's the second. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love and trust your neighbor. Right about now, after nearly 2 years of pretty vicious campaigning for the presidency and control of Congress, that level of trust feels awfully shaky. In fact, one of the main campaign pastimes has been to try to make us distrust the people who don't think like we do or they do. You know, anthropologists often refer to some of this behavior as tribalism. I'm sure you'd heard that before. I think I've talked about it. It's when the group develops a strong and positive identity among themselves and seeks to reject outsiders whose names, who are not members of the tribe. Resources are shared or rejected depending on when and where or if you belong. You know, when I was a kid growing up in Syracuse, I remember visiting the monkey cage at the Burnett Park Zoo, and my mother told me, do not stand too close to the monkey cage because the monkeys were in the habit of flinging some pretty nasty stuff at anybody they didn't trust, and that included anybody who wasn't a monkey. So it's a very good way to get contaminated with stuff you wouldn't want to be contaminated with. You weren't part of the tribe. So that visual memory has come back to me throughout this current political campaign, because we were not very far from the monkey cage at that point. Yet, trust. Dr. Francis Collins, whose book we've been studying, includes trust as one of the important guideposts on this road to wisdom we've been talking about. Trust, he says, holds relationships together, whether it's relationships with individuals or with groups, with institutions. Trust, he says, is critical as a society to be able to work together. But trust, he says, seems to be in short supply at the moment. Though no one seems to know who said it first, experience bears out this somber statement. Trust takes years to build, seconds to break, and forever to repair. We are seeing little building, a lot of breakage, and almost no repair right now. So, how do we get here? And how do we work to rebuild trust? It started for Dr. Collins, first of all, in finding out how to trust that there was a God that cares about us. He wondered, is God interested in us human beings? For so many years of his young life, he spent it as an atheist, but also one who, as a doctor, stood at the bed of terribly ill people who, despite it all, had faith in God. When he talked to them about it, they made a fair amount of sense, although he really didn't fully understand. But there were so many pointers on the way through science that pointed to God. He says the fact that the universe seems to be fine-tuned to make complexity possible, and therefore life possible. That nature follows elegant mathematical rules, and, why should that be, he questioned. It seems like there must be a mathematician and a physicist behind all this. Oh my gosh, that sounds like God. Over a period of time, Dr. Collins not only began to believe in God, but to trust God and find God in the faith of his patients. And then one day, while hiking in the Cascade Mountains in the Northwest, he says he fell on his knees and said, "I get it. I'm yours. I want to be your follower from now until eternity." That's a wonderful way to come to God. How do we first learn to trust, and how was that trust first broken for us? As an infant or a little child, the world surrounds us with love and good wishes and cares for us, but eventually we encounter people who have no interest in our happiness. I was a kindergarten kid when one afternoon, after our Donald Duck pineapple juice and graham crackers, we took a nap, and I was asleep in the nap room with the other kids. And this little girl slid over to me and bit me in the stomach hard. No reason. But then most of us who have our trust broken are surprised when it happens, especially that first time. The psychology today points out that trust involves a degree of vulnerability. It's not an easy judgment all of us can attest to, choosing who we can trust. We all know that some people excel at winning the trust of people that they intend later to victimize. These days, in the midst of America's turmoil, we are all too familiar with some of them. Reverend Megan Malone, who's a youth pastor in Medina, California, UCC, says that trust can be abused when we are taught to see ourselves as untrustworthy, when others can discredit our emotions. This is where this term gaslight comes from. They gaslight us into believing that we're wrong, and somehow what we think is evil. We are evil for thinking that way. But, she says, we also have a nervous system, that was made to guide us. We have been given senses by God to perceive the waters that we're in. And I think that sometimes trusting your gut about others may also be trusting in God, in knowing that we are held close by God, who is always present. Dr. Collins says that part of our lives are spent deciding what information to trust and who we can trust to get it from. So he underscores 4 criteria for figuring out the trustworthiness of a person or an organization. These are integrity, competence, aligned values, and humility. Integrity. In what way has this person shown in the past you can trust their word? How do you interpret what you learn about them when you research them? What's their track record for truth? The second is competence. Now, this is a big one these days. People have gotten away, if you've noticed, from checking with experts about truths and have a certain disdain for authority, like institutions of higher learning, medical experts, schools, and churches. This is interesting, and he brought this out in his book. He said, understand this. 3 out of 10 Americans still believe that Biden won in 2020 because of voter fraud. A recent Gallup poll asked people about which institutions deserved a great deal of public confidence. So who do you really trust? Only the military scored above 50%. As far as the rest, the police came in at 43%, churches 32%, presidents 26%, and at the very bottom, at 8%, was Congress. How do people come up with these negative views? The internet, for one big reason. They can lazily go online and without much effort gather information without any solid fact-checking. As one doctor said when he had given his patient a diagnosis and the patient contradicted him, he said, "Do not confuse your Google search with my medical degree." Not checking the competence of our sources has led people to swallowing toxic substances and refusing vaccinations, and that cause outbreaks of diseases not seen in decades. The next point is humility. And that's the honest recognition of one's limitations, of not claiming some exceptional insight beyond our actual expertise. And the final one is aligned values. So in this age of tribalism and division, there's not only distrust of others, but also the times we can end up accepting or rejecting truthful information simply because somebody attaches a name familiar to it that we know from our tribe. Case in point, he mentions that one day he was speaking in front of a Christian group about the importance of vaccination. And they weren't buying it until he started talking about his conversion into Christianity. And as soon as he had, then they accepted the information because he was a Christian doctor. It works in the reverse, too. So how do we deal with this era of mistrust? Dr. Collins views the answer by seeing the way our nation has changed over the years. He says, our society has historically been able to agree about a trustworthy process for identifying what is true and reliable. And some of that truth comes from science, some from faith. If properly assessed, the appropriate recognition of truth leads to trust being placed in the hands of individuals and institutions who deserve that trust. This is not hopeless, he says. These are repairs we can achieve together. That is how all of us continue to travel down that road to wisdom. No one would argue that we are living up to that standard today. Misinformation, disinformation, fear, and anger are constantly trying to knock us into the ditch. How shall we seek to turn this around? How can each of us, by our own actions, contribute to the much-needed transformation of our divided and angry society into one that regains the ability to seek truth, to listen, to understand, and love our neighbors? Maybe you don't think you have the power to make this kind of impact, but ultimately, the actions of individuals are the only way we can turn this around. If we're serious about these big problems, we've got to see that the solution begins and ends with ourselves. He offered a benediction at the end of his book, and I wanted to share that with you. It was written by a Benedictine sister, Ruth Fox. And it's beautiful, I think, for this week and for our lives in general. May God bless you with discomfort at easy answers, half-truths, and superficial relationships, so that you may live deep in your heart. May God bless you with anger at injustice, oppression, and exploitation of people, so that you may work for justice, freedom, and peace. May God bless you with tears to shed for those who suffer from pain, rejection, starvation, and war, so that you may reach out to comfort them and turn their pain into joy. May God bless you with enough foolishness to believe that you can make a difference in this world, so that you can do what others claim cannot be done. And Dr. Collins concludes this prayer with an invitation to all of us. May we all be blessed with enough foolishness to do what others claim cannot be done, and to travel down this road to wisdom with joy. And he says, come, my friends, be a part of that dream. Amen. So I wish for you this week, maybe no surprises, maybe good surprises. If they're not good surprises, I wish you the ability to process and say, God will lead us. So may God bless you and keep you all this week. May God show God's face to shine upon you and show you to trust in God and trust in the people who care about you and care about the country we all love. May God bless you all this week. Amen. Okay.